Greetings. Thank you for joining our online event today. I'm Caroline Staten, the Executive Director of Transition US, and our principal aim is to provide practical support to leaders of the transition initiatives and also those community leaders working on resilience building within their communities. And we want to continue to offer the webinars at no cost, but do ask that you consider making a donation. And we have a donation button at the top bar of our website at transitionus.org. And thank you in advance to those of you who are able to do this. And let me just describe to you the platform we're on today for those of you who might be new to it. It's called Maestro Conference. And on our end, we actually have a screen, and we can see all of your names as you enter the room. And you have the ability on this platform to press numbers on the keypad of your phone, or if you're using Skype, you can use your keypad function. And we can see those numbers from 1 to 5 showing up on our screen. So we'll be doing some polls, and we'll be letting you know the results of those as we go. So again, we'll be saying press 1, 2, 3, etc. on your keypad, and we'll be seeing that on our screen. And then later during the Q&A portion, we'll be asking you to press 1 if you have a question or comment, and we'll call on you at that point. So again, thank you for joining this call today on REconomy. And let me introduce our guest, Fiona Ward. And Fiona, she's got a very strong background in business consulting. She's worked with companies of all shapes and sizes over the last 20 years or so to define and deliver business transformation strategies. And after realizing that these kinds of transformations weren't generally what served the greater good, or in fact her own good, Fiona moved from London to South Devon in 2006, just as Transition Town Totnes was getting going. And from there she's started a number of projects. She's started the Transition Together, later called Transition Streets, and now I think called Streetwise, another wonderful venture, and Fiona, hopefully we'll have you to talk about that at another time. And she's also worked very closely with the Transition Network on the project that's called REconomy. And Fiona will be giving an overview today of the national project, as well as some detail of what's happening on the ground in places that are more advanced with this work. And then we'll also have time for Q&A. Just wanted to mention quickly before I turn it over to Fiona, Fiona will be with us for an hour today, and I know that's not enough time for this great topic, so we'll be hosting her again in the new year. So, and this call is being recorded, so you'll be able to listen to it again in a few days when we have the link online. I wanted just to ask a poll, a question for you, and if you have more interest in developing or working in your own enterprise, I'd like you to press 1. So that's if you have more interest in developing or working in your own enterprise, you'll press 1. You'll press 2 on your keypad if you have more interest in being an enabler for changing the local economy. So 1 if interest in your own enterprise, 2 if more interest in changing the local economy. So go ahead and give that a try. And we see the numbers coming in. And a few of you haven't pressed a number yet, so it could be that you don't have that ability for some reason. Again, if you're on Skype, you can enable your keypad. And so 7% are interested in their own enterprise, and 64% are more interested in changing the local economy. So that gives Fiona a place to start with, and turning it over to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Caroline. Hello, everybody. Hopefully I'll get the chance to speak to you more individually when we do the questions and answers a bit later and hear a bit more from you. But I'm delighted to see the results of that poll, because the REconomy Project is really about enabling your whole kind of local community to actually transform your local economy. And starting new enterprises is clearly an important part of that, but we feel there's a lot more to do as well. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. And I'm assuming that everybody can see the slide set that was sent out. Caroline, do we need to check that everyone's got that?
Let's just ask about that. Earlier today, Carl emailed a PDF to everyone that you can follow along with today. If by chance you didn't get that, you can go to our website, transitionus.org, same place that you went to register for the call. If you hit the link for the REconomy online event today, which is in the middle of the home page, it'll take you to the page where you can download that PDF. So again, from our home page to the webinar today, the REconomy online event, and otherwise you will have received it in your mail, and you can open it. And if by chance you haven't got this and you can't open it, don't worry. Fiona will be describing what's on the slide, and you'll be able to look at it again after the event today. So back to you, Fiona.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, certainly I'll be telling a coherent story, even if you can't see the slides, I hope. So just to get started, the REconomy Project has been going now for about 18 months in the UK. We got some funding in from various places to start this project when we realized really that we wanted to make sure that there was an appropriate level of emphasis put on the local economy. And it's always felt to me very clear that unless we can do some quite transformative work at that level, then the aims of transition can't ever be fully met, because jobs and livelihoods are so key, along with being able to deliver the local goods and services that you really want. So it really came out of that aim to present transition, or to deliver transition in its fullest possible sense. And so what we did initially was recruit a pilot group of about 10 different transition towns around the UK, and they were all at different stages of evolution. So some had just started with transition, some had been going for a long time. And we worked with them to try and understand what kind of support they might need as transition towns to do this work, to transform their local economy into something new. And when we asked them what they wanted, unfortunately everyone said, I don't know yet, because we're only just getting started with this. So it's certainly been a very collaborative process, working with them and working with our team. We've had 6 people working on this project on a part-time basis, where collectively we've tried to figure out and pull together a framework of resources that can help transition towns or villages or cities as they go about this work. And on the second slide, it explains that we've organized the resources that we've come across into a logical framework. And it feels to us like doing this work of transforming the local economy at the community level has got 3 main sections. And the first section is around leadership and vision. And I mean, that feels really critical. It's about how can we work with the other strategic organisations locally, like the councils, like the colleges, like the chambers of commerce, as they're called in this country, as well as the third sector organisations, like the voluntary sector as well. How can we work with all of those people who are currently charged with responsibility for the local economy and make sure that we're working together towards a shared vision of a new economy? It feels probably impossible for a transition group on its own to transform the local economy without the partnership working with these other organisations. So that's what the first section is. And then the second section is all about how do we transform the organisations and businesses that are already there. We already have a large number of ongoing concerns. And how do we bring transition thinking into them? How do we help them to review their business models for the risks and transform them? And then the third section is around starting new enterprises. And this is the bit that's kind of sexiest, that most people, I think, have a lot of energy for. But it feels very important that those other 2 bits are there as well. It's not just about new enterprises. And so the REconomy Project, I think really what we're here to do is 3 things. It's pulling together all of the resources into this coherent approach so that every place isn't reinventing the wheel themselves. And then it's about sharing the stories. So we're hearing more and more fantastic stories emerging from different places about new enterprises they're setting up, or new ways of connecting with the council, or ways they're connecting with the corporate bodies where they live, the corporate organisations. So we have a strong role, I think, and purpose to fill around sharing those stories, sharing those inspirational stories, which is really what Transition does anyway, but in particular here about these economic stories as well, and inspiration. And I think the other thing that we do that's quite important is work with partners, because I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but in the UK we already have quite a lot of organisations working in this space, particularly starting new enterprises in the social enterprise space. So we're really not looking to duplicate work that they're already doing, but to partner with them and to signpost people to them. So that feels really important to say. And then the third bit is about filling some of the gaps. So we know already there's some gaps in this framework that we've pulled together. And where we see these gaps, what we've tried to do is to initiate a pilot project or a new project to do the work, to come up with the answer to fill that gap. So things like the economic blueprinting, which I'll talk about a bit later, has been an example of that. And so just thought we'd run just a very quick poll here. So out of those three areas, number 1 for leadership, 2 for transform organisations, or 3 to start new enterprises. If you just do a quick poll response there to say which of those aspects you're most interested in, that will help kind of shape the rest of this presentation where I put most attention. If you're interested in all of them equally, then press number 4. Okay, so I can see the votes coming in. Still a few people thinking maybe. If you're not interested in any of them, press 5. But you probably wouldn't be here if that was the case. Okay, so that looks like most people have voted. Okay, so most people, 38%, are saying you're interested in all of them, so that's great. And then we've got 11% interested in the first one and 11% interested in the third one. So no one particularly interested in transform organisations, which is exactly what we find in our country as well, and other places, that there just doesn't seem to be that same level of enthusiasm in that part of the framework, and it's much lighter, to be honest, in terms of resources and tools and stories. For all sorts of reasons. And if you're particularly interested in that, we could talk more about that in the questions and answers. But for now, we'll go on and focus on the areas you are interested in. So if we go on to the next slide, this says, well, what is it? So what actually is REconomy in terms of tangible things? So we have a whole set of web resources. That's at reconomyproject.org, which you can take a look at whenever you get a chance. There's a little video that Rob and I made that just introduces REconomy. But that's your jumping off point into those 3 main areas of the framework. And we are still working on the navigation. I'm sure you know what it's like with website evolution, that we haven't quite nailed that yet. But hopefully you can have a dig around and find what you need. If not, let me know and I'll try and help. But we're working on that. The other important thing is lots of face-to-face opportunities so people can get together. And I know it's much easier in the UK because we're much smaller. But we just put an event on in London about REconomy for a day that Caroline was at. And I think some other people from the US. And we had 150 people come to that, which was way beyond what we thought. We thought maybe 50 people. So we know there's a big appetite for people getting together with other people doing similar work and talking about this. Again, that's true for transition, but what we're finding within the REconomy bit in particular is that it's bringing out new faces and new people with a new interest. So it's a way to broaden your reach. So we do regional events and national events as well. And we're just coming up with a REconomy event in a box, which will help the regions or the different transition towns to run their own events without us having to be involved, so helping to replicate that model much more easily. Social media, so we've got quite an active Facebook and Twitter presence going on, and that's really where more of the discussions and the day-to-day stuff gets presented out there. And then the fourth aspect is around online training. This was a strong request from the transition towns we spoke to about this, and they said rather than having face-to-face training courses to come on, they would love to have online training courses. So we're just setting up an online training platform, which is a steep learning curve for us. We haven't done that before, because clearly you have to redesign the whole training content to be interactive and engaging online. So we're just starting to set that up and pilot that in the next few months. So you'll be hearing more about that. But certainly it's a way to increase reach and help people get the skills they need. So those are the main aspects that we're working on at the moment. And if I go on to the next slide now, I'm just going to briefly dip into some of the key resources, just name them really, in each of these sections. So in leadership and vision, so you should be looking at slide 4 or page 4 now. The first thing we start off with there is why transition to a new economy? And there's some videos and resources and a presentation or two in there, because we know most people have said to us, well, how do they talk about this to their local council? You know, how do they put the case out there? How do they talk to the local businesses in the high streets or the local business associations? So we've tried to provide some things that can help you have that conversation, but we're always looking for new and better things. So if you have any, then please do share them with us. The second item, what's a transition enterprise, we'll come on to in just a second in more detail, because we realised quite early on that we needed to be clear about the kind of enterprises that we wanted to see emerge from transition and how they might be different from what we've got today. And then the third bit there is about understanding economics. I don't know what it's like in the States. Well, I do actually. I did live there for a few years, so I suspect it's probably the same as the UK. But we've got a pretty low level of economic literacy in the mainstream here, and people are daunted by economics, and they think it's incredibly mysterious, and they don't really understand it. So we're trying to demystify that a bit and just explain it in a way that people in communities can feel more comfortable talking about some of the economic issues. So again, that's a section in there we're continuing to build. We've had quite a lot of input from the New Economics Foundation here, and I know over in the States you've got a lot of knowledge around that you might want to share in a different way. Forming a leadership group, we're going to talk about that a bit later, so let's skip over that one. Creating a vision, we'll also talk about that, and developing a strategy. So different ways that people are coming up with a strategic approach to transforming their local economy, and we'll talk about the economic blueprint as an example of that. So really that whole section is about giving people the knowledge that they need to help boost their confidence to have these conversations. So if we go on to the next slide, number 5, what's the transition enterprise? I know it's quite text heavy, but this is something, I mean, we're continuing to shape this, and it would be great to get your feedback on it. If any of you would like to email me afterwards with your comments or input on this, it's very, very welcome. Because this is where we're trying to say, well, what do we mean by transition enterprise? And what we call social enterprises in the UK, it's not the same thing. Social enterprise for us don't go quite far enough. In this country, they might have a social purpose, but they tend not to include the environmental aspects, or vice versa. They'll be environmental but not social. And we want something that is all of those things. It's environmental, it's social, it's economically viable, and it does a number of other things here. So, you know, at the moment, a social enterprise could import plastic goods from China and sell them to make money to carry out their social purpose. And to us, that doesn't tick all of our boxes, obviously, hence the need for this new definition. So these are things that we're saying we think we need here. So the trade itself needs to have some sort of resilience outcome. So it's actually increasing the resilience of the community where that enterprise mainly operates, and that each enterprise themselves is as resilient and financially sustainable as possible. And then they need to have an appropriate level of resource use. So there we're recognising resource limits, particularly fossil fuels, of course. The next one's about appropriate localization and scale. This question of scale is really interesting, is, you know, how big is too big and how small is the right size? And clearly that there is no right answer to that. It's going to differ from sector to sector, and there's issues of power and everything else that get included in that. So at the moment we're framing as appropriate localization. Where it makes sense to do it locally, we do it locally. Where it makes sense to do it regionally, we do it regionally, nationally or globally. And then the fourth one is also pretty key. It's about more than profit. We're certainly not anti-profit, but it's about what you do with the profit that is of most interest to us. So here we're saying excess profit should prioritise the community benefit rather than investor benefit. Obviously, if you've got community investors, then that's even better. And then the last point is about being part of the community and working towards building a commonwealth, particularly around land and other assets that are there locally. So any questions about those, welcome to ask those at the end. And as I say, welcome any input. These are aspirational, it's important to say as well. There's not many enterprises that could meet all of those at the moment. So we put them out as an aspiration for the businesses to work towards. So on to the next slide then, transform organisations. I'm not going to talk about this because none of you are interested particularly in that. So let's skip over that and look at start new enterprises. So I'm on slide 7 now. And this is the biggest section. I'm just pulling out a few things here, but what we've been asked for mostly is that we provide inspiration here. So lots of different case studies of lots of different types of enterprises. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But also about offering support. And I think it's important to be clear here, this difference between who's offering support. So I'm speaking to you today as part of this national REconomy Project, and it's not our role to offer direct support to transition enterprises. We're really clear about that. What we're here to do is to help build the capacity of each transition initiative to offer support to their local entrepreneurs. So that will have a very different flavour in each of the different places depending on what support is currently available, what funding there might be, what kind of business environment you're working in, what local assets you've got, all that kind of thing. But setting up an incubator, if that term means something to you like a small business incubator or a startup incubator or a hub, is quite important towards doing that. So just talk a little bit more about each of those. If you go on to the next slide, number 8, one of the things we've just launched is a campaign. It's primarily a social media campaign, which is called The Story of the New Economy in 50 Enterprises. And what we're trying to do here is to present a positive vision of what can be. And I really like the little kind of bit of text that we've got there. But for those of you who aren't there, it just says, a friend of mine is a racing car driver. He once told me what he's trained to do if he's facing an imminent crash. Imagine that his car goes out of control and, for example, on one side of the road there's a brick wall and on the other is a nice big open field full of flowers. He's trained to focus on the safe zone in the field and it increases his chances of landing there. And that seems to apply exactly to what we're trying to do here. There's so much economic gloom and doom. I can't even begin to tell you, although it sounds like you're suffering pretty much yourselves as well. And so this really kind of positive but credible understanding of the economic potential of what we're offering here is that thing, it's the open field full of flowers, and it's really starting to happen. We're seeing lots of new enterprises emerging, lots of new models of how things can be different and be done in different ways and give all of those benefits of what's a transition enterprise. So the more we can actually capture these case studies and these stories and share them, the better. So we're looking for 50 enterprises that are happening all around the world, and we're going to pull them together and demonstrate how if they were all done in one place, then that has the power to really transform the economy in a significant way. So that's the campaign that we're just getting underway. And if you have any examples of great inspirational new enterprises like that, then please let us know. So on the next slide, slide number 9, we do have case studies already on the website. You can find those in the Start Enterprises section, but we're looking to grow those. So it's a much, much bigger set of case studies. So what you see there is just the starting point at the moment. So back on slide 9, in terms of offering local support, what we've done here, I'm just going to put my Totnes hat on for a moment because I do also do some work for Transition Town Totnes around this stuff. But what we did there, and I know it's very hard to see the small text on the slide with little photos, but we thought about what different needs are coming to us. So people in our community are coming to us and saying, some people might say, oh, I just want to do something new with my life. I might set up a new enterprise. I don't really know what it is. Can you help me with some ideas? So they really are looking just for kind of total inspiration from the beginning. And then someone else might come along and say, I've got an idea for a new enterprise, but I just want to talk to someone about it. Is this viable? I need somebody to sense check this about. All the way up at the other extreme to people saying, I've got a really credible, well thought through business plan. I'm ready to try and get some significant investment in. I need some help with perfecting my pitch, and then I want to be introduced to investors. So you've got that whole spectrum of people likely sitting in your community that are needing different kinds of support. So what we're doing in places like Totnes or with places like Totnes is trying to understand what kind of local support services they can offer, and what then REconomy can do as a national project to try and make some of those things happen. You know, what makes sense to do locally and what makes sense to do nationally. So there's an organisation here called the School for Social Entrepreneurs who've got a great set of courses set up, and we're thinking about working with them at a national level to have a school for transition entrepreneurs, so to have our own flavour of that set up. So that kind of thing makes sense to do nationally. So this is something we're just really exploring, the different models of support, how they might be financed. Some things might be offered for free, like local volunteer mentors is quite popular in this country, and we have a lot of retired professionals around where we live who we know would just love to give time to help new enterprises get underway. So there we're just a bit of a dating agency for people just trying to match them up. But really important, I think, is that we bring in some of the transition thinking to that discussion. Otherwise, they might just be getting the business as usual advice rather than the advice that we might want to be putting in there. So it needs a little bit of thinking about. So those things are all emerging at this point in time, and these different stories about how support is happening and how it's being financed is really key. So if we go on to the next slide, number 10, what's happening in the field. So what I've spoken about really so far has been the National REconomy Project. And I wanted to find out recently, well, what's actually happening. You know, it's been a year or so since we've spoken to those TIs or in any detail. So I went out and had a visit, and I spent a couple of weeks going around the country and visiting a load of different transition towns and finding out what they're doing. So on the next slide, on slide 11, again, I know it's small text, but I'm giving you the web link there so you can go and see the detail, either now or later. Just from visiting about 8 places that you can see there, each place I went to had at least 2, and most of them had sort of 3, 4, 5 different enterprises that are emerging. Now, that is why I picked those places. So certainly there's loads of transition towns in the UK that aren't doing this yet. These are the ones that have tended to have been going for a couple of years. But what we most see coming out are energy companies, so community-owned energy companies, mainly around solar PV, but there is also some wind and hydro. We've seen quite a lot of food projects like food hubs and community-supported agriculture type schemes. We've seen quite a lot of remakeries, so people who are fixing things, repairing things. My favourite quote I saw on one is, "Don't despair, repair," for any electrical goods that you've got. Remaking, upcycling, those kinds of things are emerging quite strongly. And then the other aspect is local currency projects is very popular. That's quite a sexy thing, I think, to do here in the UK. And I'm speaking to you from Bristol tonight, where they've just launched a citywide electronic local currency, which is very exciting. And local businesses can use that, and they can pay their business rates in it, and they can even put some of it through their payroll. Their employees can choose to be paid in Bristol pounds, which is quite exciting. So just a quick poll here, just wondering whether any of you are involved in any of these kinds of enterprises that we're seeing emerge in the UK. So if you press 1 if you're involved in any sort of, or highly interested in, let's say, energy generation or efficiency type enterprises, so press 1 for that. Press 2 for food-related businesses. Press 3 for anything to do with remaking stuff, repairing stuff, fixing, upcycling, that kind of thing. 4 if you're really into local currency projects, or 5 for something else.
You want to say those again, Fiona?
Yeah, sure. So the first one, number 1 for energy generation or energy efficiency projects, so anything to do with renewables basically, or energy efficiency. The second one, anything to do with food businesses, growing, distribution, whatever. The third one to do with remakery, so repairing, fixing, upcycling. And the fourth one around local currencies. And number 5 for something else. And sorry, there should be an option there for if you're not actually involved or particularly interested in any of those, but I'll assume you'll just not vote if that's the case. So that's fascinating. So we've got a really good balance there between 1, 2, 3, and 5. So between energy, food, and remaking stuff, they're all equal. And other is equal. So I'm interested to know what those are. Hopefully that'll come out in the questions and answers a bit. But it sounds a bit like you've got a similar spread to us there. Right, so on to the next slide, slide 12. And this was just some other reflections on my road trip, so that I thought might be of use to you. So as I say, these transition towns have been going for a few years. They're starting to look at doing enterprises, and they're actively managing to employ some people within them. And there is a detailed blog post I refer there. I'm sorry about the unfriendly URL web links, but we haven't quite turned that on yet. But what I found from about 10 transition towns I visited is that the ones that have really been very active in starting new enterprises, those have tended to suck up all the energy from the core of the transition initiative. And there's often created a bit of a vacuum at the centre where the transition initiative almost just goes dormant while they're busy with the new enterprises. So not to say there's a problem with that, but it was a notable pattern that happened in most places I went to. So it's just something to be aware of. And then about the time I was going back and visiting, and they were starting to notice that, many of them were at the point of, right, we're going to get back together and come up with a strategy to move forward from a more coordinated sense from the core of the TI. So that was very interesting that happened. The second thing was about some of the TIs took a very planned strategic approach to their new enterprises and economic development. And others, it was much more organic. Things just popped up. It depended what people were interested in. And there was a real extreme on that spectrum, but both seem to have been very successful. So it's not that you always have to have a planned strategy by any means. Although those that had a more organic approach were all quite interested in becoming more strategic, funnily enough. The third thing that came out very strongly was how on earth do people resource the work? So how do they pay themselves to do this work, to do this enabling work at the heart of a transition town, to do this economic development work? How do they get paid, and how is their time going to be covered? And there weren't really any easy answers to that besides funding. But if you look at that blog post, we discuss it in a lot more detail there. And there are some quite interesting ideas starting to come through about how we might be able to do that. But it's needing quite a lot more good stories in there, I think. And then the fourth point, which is interesting, is that quite a lot of the transition towns are saying, we've really got to the point where we need to get more people involved in transition in our community. We need to start recruiting more. We need to do more outreach. And quite a lot of them were thinking they'd go back and do more of the same. So more film showings, more local networking, more posters around town, that kind of thing. But some of the places have taken a different approach where they've recruited different people in a different way. So by setting up a local REconomy project in Totnes, for example, that has attracted a whole new audience for transition beyond saying to people, oh, come to an event or come and join a working group or come and join a project. So I think starting to do some REconomy stuff does seem to give a new channel into transition somehow in a different way. And the other thing that's had quite a big impact in Totnes and increasingly in other places, and Caroline mentioned this earlier, was Transition Together or Transition Streets, where we get neighbours involved in forming their own little group, usually 5 to 6 households. They get together, they go through a workbook of saving energy use, reducing water use, using more local food, that kind of thing. And we've got about 60 of those groups running in Totnes at the moment. And they've become like these little mini transition initiatives in their own right, where they all come up with their own little projects. Now, those people wouldn't consider they're part of Transition Town Totnes, but they're absolutely out in the front line doing the stuff. So I think there's something really interesting there about how we can broaden the appeal of transition without going through, or back through that traditional outreach stuff. So there's a lot more stuff on that in the detailed link that I've given you there. So, on to slide 13, which is the economic evaluation pilots. I've mentioned these already. I use the term economic blueprint or economic evaluation interchangeably. The main title is economic evaluation, but you can call it what you like in the town that you live in. And in Totnes, we've called it an economic blueprint. And we're running this particular project in 3 different places, and we're doing that for a good reason. We're running it in Transition Town Totnes because Totnes is a market town, which is a very specific kind of demographic for this country. We're running it in Transition Hereford, which is a rural county. Their transition happens at county level in many cases there. And we're running it in Transition City Manchester as a dense urban city with quite a few disadvantaged areas within it. And what we're aiming to do with this economic evaluation, this is one of these strategic leadership type tools that might be helpful to you. If you go on to the next slide, number 14, this just tells you what the objectives are of doing an economic evaluation. And what we're really trying to do here is to quantify the potential economic value of key sectors within our new local economy. And we're doing this in order to show that there is a credible alternative to the current economic Plan A model or paradigm. And it felt to us very important that we can show in numeric terms, which is what most councils and businesses and organisations are used to say, look at this, we're not just a few hippies looking to sell a few pots of jam. There's significant economic potential and jobs and livelihoods in transforming certain sectors within our community, within our local economy. And so we started off looking at food, retrofitting homes, so making domestic properties more energy efficient, and developing our renewable energy assets, because we thought, those things, they've got fantastic economic potential for us, and they can provide a lot of jobs, and they're really important. We need to be able to feed ourselves, heat our homes for a reasonable amount of money, develop our renewable energy assets, and have somewhere to invest our money, which I'd rather put in a renewable energy company locally than in the stock market, that's for sure. So we wanted to explore each of those areas and see if we could put a number on the economic potential of those things. And then, having done that, we wanted to recommend a number of projects or activities that we could do in order to turn that potential into reality. And then the fourth objective, which it feels absolutely essential to do this work, is to unite a group of local strategic partners behind the delivery of these projects. So it feels like, again, this cannot just be a transition project. This has to be done in partnership with those local strategic organisations. And we thought, if we can do this, if we can really do this work, get everyone together, figure it out, and get behind it, then without doubt we're going to have better informed strategic economic planning and decision making that will really help achieve transition's aims and the aims of REconomy as well. And I'm delighted to say we just about finished this work in the 3 places in Totnes. The others are still ongoing. But it's gone really well. I'm quite delighted about that. And we're just sharing the first results. I've just posted them, and I'll give you the link to this in a minute. But if you go on to the next slide, slide 15, I'll talk about Totnes. I'm sorry to keep using that as an example, but I've been doing the work there, so I'm most familiar with it. And so what we've got there is our local Totnes Town Council is part of our economic forum that we built especially for this. We've got our local college. We've got Dartington and Schumacher, who are quite important to us locally as a college. We've got our Chamber of Commerce. We have our overall district council, which is really key to us. We have something called a development trust, which is a third-party organisation, third sector organisation. We have another technical college, and we've been running and facilitating that process. And we got this group together about a year ago. And if you go on to the next slide, we asked ourselves, well, what do we want our local economy to do for us? So here in Totnes, what is the purpose of our local economy? How do we want it to be different from what we've got today? And so this is the purpose statement that we came up with. So the purpose is to maximise the happiness and well-being of our entire community, to create an abundance of opportunity to satisfy our needs and use and distribute resources fairly and in a way that respects natural limits. So we've tried to put in there, all that important stuff about the economic system overall. It's one thing to do that for an individual enterprise, but really we're talking about the whole economic system. And we had a good discussion about the kind of growth we want to see, and we want to see a growth in happiness and well-being. So that's really key for us, this shifting the debate into growth and happiness and well-being and away from things like GDP and other purely economic measures. And there was an extraordinary level of agreement about that. We didn't have any really strong debates or arguments about that at all. So that's underpinned the work that we've been doing with this group in Totnes over the last year. And if we go on to the next slide, 17. And, there's so much, we could just spend sort of hours just talking about this one slide alone. But I just want to say that the detailed reports are available if you want to know more on this. But we were able to answer questions like, within Totnes, so we've got about 26,000 people, something like that. How how much do we spend on food and drink here today? So we know we spend about £30 million a year. We know that the vast majority of that, 20 million, is spent in 2 supermarkets, and practically all of that, 17 million of that, in just one big supermarket. And about 60 independents then have to share the rest of it. And we've got quite a strong local food economy in Totnes already. That picture is a lot worse in most places, where 81% of all spend goes through just 6 companies, our 6 big supermarkets. And I'm sure you have a similar situation, if not worse, in the States. We also looked at the value of the food and drink that we actually produce locally. You know, we're a big producer, particularly fruit and veg down where we live, and we produce £58 million worth a year. That's farm gate prices, so it's worth a lot more at retail prices. But we only buy £8 million worth of local produce, so we're producing an awful lot of stuff that we're not buying locally, and we're then importing the rest of it from outside our area. So we've been able to show some numbers for these things and translate that to jobs and what have you. And the last thing is really the really important question: why does it matter? You know, that's the story we have to tell here. Why does it matter where we spend the money, whether it's in a big corporate supermarket or a little local independent? And why does it matter where the food comes from an economic perspective? And if we go on to the next slide, slide 18, this is just one of the ways that we're starting to use to communicate this really to people in our local community, but also to our businesses, is that it's just a quadrant here where you've either got the, along the bottom, you either buy from the big supermarkets or you buy from local independents, and on the left-hand side you buy products from here or you buy products from other places. And the most advantage is in that green, that top right quadrant that says what's good for our local suppliers and good for local outlets is if you buy from them locally sourced products, because then you've got the maximum local multiplier. That's something the New Economics Foundation have calculated about how much money is worth if you keep it circulating in the local system and it doesn't leak out. It provides the most jobs, it gives you the optimum social and environmental benefits. So there's a lot more on this in the report. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm not going to talk an awful lot more about that. But it's really key is how we articulate the story about why that matters. Why does it matter where we spend that money? So we're getting closer to being able to do that. And then if you jump onto the next slide, 19, this is just for the food sector, but we came up with a number of projects, some of which are already underway. I'm sure where you are, you're already doing some stuff in this space. But there were 2 main areas we needed to look at. So on the left-hand side, there's some awareness-raising projects. And then there's a whole piece of work around building capacity, because the truth is if our big supermarkets shut tomorrow, we'd be stuffed because we don't have a local supply chain that can fully meet the needs, you know, that demand for local food. So we need a good few years to do things like research more the gaps that we've got in local production. We do grow quite a lot of crops locally, but they're not crops for us, they're crops for animal feed, for example. So we then need to understand that more and work with suppliers to actually shift what they're growing. We need to shift the distribution model, so using more food hubs, for example. We need to network the local suppliers and outlets together more. We need to set up one of these business incubators, for example. So we have all these project ideas and activities, and what we did with that group, if you go on to the next slide, slide 20, and I know you can't read that, you're not supposed to be able to read the very detailed stuff there, but just to get this idea that across all those sectors, so across the food sector, the retrofit, the renewable energy, we identified nearly 40 projects that could realise the potential, and then we got the 8 organisations together, those strategic organisations, and we prioritised them. So we do have a workable plan about how we're going to turn that potential into reality. And yeah, any more questions about that can come up in the Q&A. That's a very quick gallop through a big piece of work. And just thought it useful just to do a quick poll at this point. I've just gone on to the next slide, slide 21, which kind of says what the poll is. But I'm just wondering, I know that was so quick, hopefully you have some level of understanding of what I was just talking about, but it's just whether you think that might be a useful process to run in your own community, something like that. So if you press 1 if you definitely think that might be something useful to do where you are, press 2 if maybe it's useful, 3 if you think no way would that work where you live, 4 if you say, well no, we've already done something like this, and 5 if you don't know. So do you think that might be a useful process to run in your own community? 1 definitely, 2 maybe, 3 no way, it just wouldn't work here. 4, no, you've already done something like it, or 5 if you don't know.
And Fiona, just to be clear, that's the economic evaluation or economic blueprint
Exactly.
work.
Thank you. Yes, just talking about this economic blueprint. This is just one of the resources within REconomy overall. So that's interesting. So we've got one voter saying that they've already done something like this. I'll be very interested to hear more about that at some point. And we've got 38% saying definitely they think that could be a useful process, and 27% saying that maybe, and no one saying no, they wouldn't think it would work there. So that's interesting because we're finding a lot of interest in this around the UK, and we're making that the content of this online training pilot so that we can quickly kind of get this process out there and help people run something similar where they are. So that'll be available to you guys as much as to anyone else. And then my final bit, just very quickly, is about investment readiness. So a bit of a mind shift again here. But if you go on to slide 22, then the other gap I think we've got in the framework at the moment, well, I mean really in the whole market at the moment, is how do we make sure that all of these enterprises that are emerging out of transition or similar things, have got appropriate investment finance available. It's a real problem in this country for people to get the right sort of investment for their business. And particularly more so if you're more socially or environmentally minded. So we're starting to put some work into piloting a kind of investment readiness scheme that can help people get the money that they need. So in a nutshell, this little cycle of 4 things here, if you imagine this is a transition town here, so this transition incubator underway is trying to stimulate this general culture of entrepreneurship locally, and they're providing inspiration, so businesses can come along and get inspired, or new entrepreneurs can get inspired. They can get help from that mentoring, coaching or training or whatever through the incubator. But then at the point that they need money, for us in this country there's a couple of options. There is access to some sort of local investors. So there's things like local angels, green angels they're called here, people that you might find locally can invest in your new enterprises. There's also crowdfunding models and crowdfunding platforms. There's community share issues, credit unions, microfinance. So there's a number of things that can happen locally and should happen locally. But then there's also something I think that we can put in place nationally here, particularly for people looking for a bit bigger funding, where we can connect them up with these bigger social investors to try and make sure that the right money is available at the right time to unlock some of this enterprise potential. So, and then at the end, slide 23 is the final slide there, just giving you the project website that you can check out, and my email address. So do contact me directly. If we don't get to answer your question, then let me know. I appreciate it. It's probably in about 15 minutes left for questions here. And so there's a very quick gallop through the REconomy Project. And back to you, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Very inspiring, and so much more depth could be gotten into in all of those various areas. Yeah. But right now we'll turn it over to our participants for questions and comments. And if you do have a question or comment, you can press 1 on your keypad, and I'll call on you. And the first person is Naomi Block. So Naomi,
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. I'm in Maryland in the U.S. and I love this whole thing. And I just wanted to say that Maryland was the first state in the United States to start something called the B Corporation, which is an official assist for the triple bottom line approach, where it's people, planet, and profit. And, I don't know how many people, I know Fiona was saying earlier that sort of the general low IQ people have with regard to the economy. I think a lot of people are distressed at why corporations are such, too often, are trashing the planet and not really seeming to care about anything but profits. Apparently, legally, for their shareholders, they are required, first and foremost, to maximize profits. So the need to bring about the B Corporation was essential to make it actually legally possible for a company to, quote-unquote, do the right thing. So that that I think is of great interest, and it sounds, just based on what I heard, I did have to join the call late because I voted today. So at any rate, and then here there's something called the Freelancers Union. Another question I wanted to throw out was what you know, if anything, about the co-housing communities movement that started in Denmark. And then there's also something, the founder, an elderly gentleman here in Washington, D.C., that founded time banking, which is a way for people to literally join forces and, without money. So it's in a way part of local currency, but it's not a currency per se. It's an exchange hour for hour, regardless of what it is that you're helping with. If you're an accountant or if you're a babysitter, it all counts the same. So this might be something to look at also in these early going on getting these off the ground.
Thank you, Naomi. Fiona, did you want to respond to any of that?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, certainly the co-housing is quite topical for us because, again, in Totnes, there's a new development on the wharf, which includes, for the first time, a co-housing plan, which is quite groundbreaking. Unfortunately, they started off with a massive number of people interested, but I think when push is coming to shove, they're struggling a bit to get the numbers there. So they're going to have to do quite a lot of marketing to get people involved. But it's a fantastic idea, and we're absolutely behind it as a Transition Town Totnes. And the thing about time banking, I absolutely agree. There's lots of other stuff, and the whole thing around the gift economy being a big part of this new kind of economy is really key. And there's a whole section in the framework which we're about to post, which is around alternative means of exchange. So local currency is only one part of that, but time banking, gift exchanging, barter, lots of other things need to be in there as well as part of the mix. So I agree with that.
Thank you, Fiona. And on to Ken Shaw.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Ken.
Okay. I'm Ken Shaw. I'm in Prince Rupert, British Columbia, and kind of a little different question. I'm involved. I'm on an advisory committee for a pension fund, and we're the fourth largest in Canada, over $80 billion. And in our meetings, we deal with issues about relating to investment, and when you have $80 billion, you're kind of stuck with issues like investing in companies that mine in Central America and make a terrible mess. And people are looking for some alternative. So I'm trying to get enough knowledge about the project and what options I could present to a pension fund that has that kind of capital in some alternative investment strategies. Just wondering what ideas you might have around that.
Yeah, I think this whole thing around investment readiness, I mean, we do get a number of social investors coming to us and saying, hey, as you're saying, but perhaps not at that scale, that they've got money they want to invest somewhere that's a bit more safe or a bit more, sustainable longer term, and which is partly why we're looking at putting in place this mechanism to support the emergence of these new enterprises and then to hold their hands as they go through the first few years of startup and what have you, to get to the point that they're then looking for more significant investment, that we can almost like cover off that whole pipeline. I think something we notice with investors at the moment is they do love to come along at the very end of that pipeline and reap the rewards. But we're working with investors that are starting to see more. They need to invest right back at the beginning of that pipeline and play a role in helping those new enterprises to emerge. So we're trying to shift the debate a little bit on that, but it is early days for us. We don't have anywhere yet to put money of that size other than the emerging energy projects. For us, those are the ones that need the biggest investment and are most reliable at the moment because we have quite a lot of good subsidies in this country anyway. I'm not sure what it's like where you are. But I'd say that's emerging, and it's something really interesting to watch.
Thank you, Fiona and Ken. And any other questions? Currently there are no hands up, but press 1 on your keypad if you have a question or a comment. We have a very rich resource here with Fiona, and she covered so much material. I'm presuming there's a lot of other questions there. I know Rains Cohen has his hand up, and I think there's a group with you, Rains, listening to this. So go ahead.
We ended up with just me today, but we will be bringing the information forward in our local transition and co-housing groups. But I was curious if you're plugging into if the UK is getting this slow money movement, other connections to social responsibility, essentially as a way to funnel funds directly into these type of ventures.
Yeah, it's funny. I've heard more about that over the last couple of weeks than I ever have before, but I haven't looked into it deeply yet. Is that something that you feel's got a lot of potential for us, for transition?
We're seeing, we're looking at potentially for slow homes, and we're already seeing it being used for communities that include agricultural preservation elements as a way of making it possible to keep the farm and do your development in the less farmable areas, and energies to be found there.
Yeah, and are there good case studies already, do you know, of where that's working already that we could share with people?
It's slowly emerging. I'll send over some of the examples we have from here.
Thank you. That would be great. Yeah.
Any other
and I'm always really, really keen to accept any blog posts. If any of you have a particular interest that you'd like to share with others in transition and you're happy to do a short blog post on it, I'd really welcome that. So maybe that's a topic for that, Rains, if that's feasible for you.
And any other questions or comments? We have a few more minutes with Fiona, but I think just time for one more question if there is one. And Fiona, not seeing any at this point, we'll go into our wrap-up. I know you have an event to get to, and just wanted...
just briefly, if we could just see, if there's no questions, that's fine. There's a lot of stuff there, but just whether hearing about REconomy, some of these ideas, it feels like that's something people might want to bring into their own transition initiatives. Could we just do a quick check-in on that, maybe?
Yes, I see John Scott put his hand up now.
Okay, good.
I had a quick question about the co-op, how the co-op structure works, and then maybe a system of accounts that would be a way to incentivize some sort of organic project, where it comes out. You put like your blueprint shows the projects, the people, and I was just wondering if you have an overlay for the system of accounts that would make that an incentive for people to actually measure and accomplish what they're trying to get done.
Right. Okay, so like the legal structure, you mean, of a cooperative, for example?
Because it seems to me that those are the driving forces behind the economy, sometimes the regulations and the interplay. And I was just wondering if there's any kind of, access to that stone wall that would actually enhance this.
Yeah, I think so, and it's very country specific, I think, the actual terms of it, but here cooperatives, most of the transition enterprises that have merged are a cooperative in the way we define a cooperative, and some of them then are within that called something like an industrial and provident society, which then has rules around how the dividends can be distributed, for example, or what can be done with the assets, as you might expect. And we also have something called KICs, or community interest companies, as well here. So there's quite a range of models, and I'm no expert on that, but we do have our trade association for cooperatives here in the UK are really, really good at offering advice on what legal structure is best for new enterprises, and they've got a whole wealth of resources which we connect to for the UK market, certainly from our website. So there's loads of really good guides, and they give free support and that kind of thing. So that's an example of where we're not the experts, but we link to the people who are, and we've got a good partnership with them.
Do you think a private commercial contract would create a public-private partnership that could make cut through all the bureaucracy? Since private commercial contracts are pretty much strong anywhere.
I'm not sure I know enough about your question to answer that. I think it feels like we
I'm just trying to say, in order to establish a project and make it self-sufficient and make it economical.
So like a transition. Sorry.
Exactly. That's my last question. If you can give me
okay.
Any
yeah, I think some of the transition initiatives have set themselves up, but they've tended to set themselves up as cooperatives or as charities, which gives you different rights here in the UK. I'm still not quite sure I'm answering your question though.
Oh, it's an unknown factor, I think. I think when you're talking about transitions, I think those underlying agreements need to be tweaked. And that's kind of where I stand. Is like how do you put your stuff together so that it would really be a demonstration of what a new economy really looks like, because you're almost setting up a new set of regs and rules, but you have to operate within the existing framework. So it's like jumping from transition to transformation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's quite funny because even here, just getting your status as a charity, you have to jump through all sorts of hoops. And the first thing Transition Network had to do was prove why addressing issues of climate change was in the public interest. So, there's sort of some groundbreaking stuff we need to do around some of those things, I think.
And I promised Fiona that she could get off the call in time for her event. So I'm sorry I won't be able to take questions right now from Shannon, from Howard, and from Naomi, but Fiona did leave her email address, so please do feel free to email her with your questions. And just wanted to give you a last wrap-up comment, Fiona, and then mention a few upcoming webinars we have on the economy as well. So just a final closing comment from you, Fiona?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it feels like I'd love to hear an awful lot more from all of you on the call and find out more about your thoughts and whether you feel this is, the ideas and the framework and this stuff we've talked about is helpful for you, because I've been quite UK focused up until now, or Europe. So if you do get a chance to email me with any comments or feedback, that would be very, very welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. I did want to mention to people that we do have a monthly telesalon on November 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Hope you can join us for that. We have the third part of the local food shift. Now this is with Transition Colorado and Transition Sarasota. And Transition Colorado was able to get $1.5 million of venture capital to start food projects, so right along this line that Fiona's talking about. And they're doing the third part Tuesday, November 13th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And the other two parts are on our website, and you can listen to those. And then we have a call on December 6th with Joanne Poyerow of Transition LA. And she's put a lot of focus and thinking on local economy in a metro area, and will share her insights and what she's learning. So please join us for that. And then without further ado, I'm going to just have Carl unmute everyone on the line. And let's see. And so he's doing that. And just want to thank you so much, Fiona, for joining us today, and look forward to round 2 sometime in the new year when we can have you back. And
great. Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Yes, and everyone on the call, feel free to shout out your appreciation to Fiona, if you would, as we sign off today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Fiona.
you.